Cory spent years running towards danger. He saved lives, handled chaos, took pride in his work as a firefighter. When his marriage collapsed, when he lost the rhythms of family life, coaching kids' soccer games, bedtime stories, Sunday breakfasts, he wasn't running into a burning building anymore. He was running on empty, and no one saw it happening. Firefighters and first responders, they face some of the highest rates of PTSD, depression, divorce, suicide risk. Unlike other professions, though, their trauma happens in the same places that they call home. And the worst part, most of them suffer in silence, in martyrdom to the job. Today, we're talking about the crisis no one else is talking about, but more importantly, we're talking about how we can start to move first responders towards healing. I'm Dr. Andrew Smith. I'm a psychologist and I specialize in trauma and resilience. I spent years directing the occupational trauma program for first responders in my time at the University of Utah. I've worked with hundreds of firefighters and EMTs, people just like Cory, who are struggling with PTSD, isolation, losing their sense of purpose outside the job. I'm the founder of Rewire, which is a framework designed to help first responders, trauma survivors, people in high stress occupations, college students, parents, people in struggling marriages alike. If you're ready to take a first step to jumping into the Rewire approach that you're going to be hearing more about through Cory's story today, visit rewirewellness.co. We've got a free relationship health assessment and plan builder to get you started down the path of healing in the same kind of ways that Cory was able to find. Here's the roadmap for what I want to talk about today. Number one, why firefighters like Cory are more isolated than ever. The silent crisis. Number two, the science of social support, how connection protects us against PTSD, depression, suicide. Number three, part three, how Cory rewired connection and the exact steps that we use to help him rebuild his life. And part four, how you can start today, practical steps to strengthen your relationships, even if you feel completely stuck. Let's start with the problem, part one. Most people think of firefighting as a dangerous job, and they're right. But the biggest dangers aren't just fire and smoke. They're not just danger on the roadside. They're the mental and emotional toll that builds over time. See, working with a lot of veterans, as well as firefighters, I've noticed that unlike soldiers who experience trauma in distant battlefields, first responders live and work in the same places where their worst calls happen. They respond to overdoses, fatal car accidents, domestic violence calls, suicides, sometimes just blocks from where they live. Some of those calls involve people that they know instead of some foreign enemy. So I'm not legitimizing veteran experience or firefighter experience, but it makes the phenomenology of that difference, the lived experience of that difference, makes for a different recovery environment. Cory asks me something that a lot of first responders have asked me, and perhaps he was asking seemingly rhetorically. He said, how do you make small talk at a barbecue when you've just cleaned up a fatal overdose on the same street the day before? This creates a double bind because the places and people that we rely on for our comfort become reminders of the very trauma that we're trying to escape. Over time, this leads to isolation, withdrawal. And this withdrawal, it's not just a coincidence. Studies show that repeated exposure to trauma rewires the way that our brains work, making firefighters more cynical, detached, isolated as a way of self-protection. Some of my own research has shown this. And when firefighters feel disconnected from their families and communities, which is pretty common across the career span at times, their risk for PTSD and suicide goes through the roof. So part two, here's what the research shows. Social support is the single most powerful predictor and protector against PTSD, depression, and suicide. Among firefighters, strong social networks, strong social networks and diverse social networks that include coworkers, supervisors, family members, they're linked to lower PTSD symptoms and reduced risk for suicide. But the culture in many firehouses still discourages vulnerability. There's an unspoken rule that you keep your struggles to yourself, that asking for help is a sign of weakness, that it could impact your career. And I don't think that's so far from the truth at times. What makes it even harder for firefighters to stay connected to people who could help them heal is this stigma. So what do we do? That brings us to Cory. Part 3. When Cory comes to me, he's not just dealing with a divorce. His world is being shattered. He's completely disconnected from his kids, his friends, and is even starting to put distance between himself and his crew at work. So we use a Rewire approach to help him rebuild connection in 4 key ways. Number 1, committed action towards his kids. So the family is being restructured, and the pain and loss of that is almost too much. But we notice that, and we start from that position. Showing up even when he doesn't feel like it. School events, dinners, time together, even when the pain of how things have changed are powerful, he lets his values as a man who shows up, a man who cares for his kids, win out over his pain of the loss. Number 2, setting boundaries with his ex-wife. Keeping communication focused on co-parenting and protecting his mental health, which sometimes means not biting on some of the nastier components of the ways that she's communicating with him. Step 3 for Cory, repairing friendships. Reaching out to friends he's withdrawn from, rebuilding trust through small, consistent actions, setting bike rides, ski dates, times to spend time outside together, climbing together. And step 4, helping others through peer support. One of the most tried and true forms of stress relief is to get out of your own self at the center of the universe, woe is me struggle, and serve other people who are struggling. So Cory volunteered to start supporting other firefighters who were struggling with trauma, which reinforced his own healing, who were struggling with family system changes, relationship dysfunctions like Cory had. So here's part 4 today. If you feel stuck, here's where to start. 1, reach out to one person. 2, set a boundary where you need it with folks that aren't very healthy for you right now. Part 3, or step 3 for you, find a support group, a peer mentor. Think about mental health treatment. If you're ready to take the next step, we've actually put together a free guide and plan builder that can help you start improving your relationships. So link in the description of rewirewellness.co. You can engage with us. You can get started on the right path with tools and an AI-supported therapy that you can do in your own way, on your own time, without having to walk that stigma path, without having to pay out the nose for therapy if money's a problem. We've built an approach that we think is really scalable and helpful, built on the kind of stuff that we had Cory do that sort of started to reframe and rehabilitate and redeem his life and relationships. So you don't have to go through this alone. Reach out, rebuild. If this video helped you, like it, subscribe, share it with someone who you think might need it. Have hope. Take care and see you in the next video.